So that brings us back to what is going to be the most debatable and part of this, and that is Tommy Rees. We'll get into more specifics about Tommy Rees and quarterback versus coordinator and that whole debate. That's a different conversation for a different day because he is the quarterback's coach. He's going to be the quarterback's coach. I think for me, for Tommy Rees, Ryan, what he's done so far has not been good enough. I would think he would admit that because the results are what they are. Now, you can say, well, COVID in 2020, which kept the offense from getting going. You had the injuries to Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey and all. He was working with a kind of one hand behind his back with the coaching staff, a receiver, and offensive line. 2021, you had these issues and that issues, and the line wasn't good and all these other kind of things. And then this year, you start the year without your captain, Avery Davis. Joe Wilkins is hurt, who was supposed to provide depth. Lorenzo Styles kind of mentally goes in the tank and you're doing everything you can to design plays early in the year, get him the ball. And he's just dropping easy stuff. And then you have the injury to Tyler Buckner in week 2. And so you've got all these excuses that you can use, but I don't really care about those right now. It's a simple thing for me. What he has done so far has not been good enough. But, there's no but about what he's done. What I have seen, however, is when he is on, he is on. He is in the head of coaches when he's on. Clemson had no answers for what Tommy was doing in the run game. And as soon as they would think they would line up thinking, okay, we're going to adjust to this. And then he'd come back with something different before they even stopped what he was already doing. The fact that they ran for 286 yards and didn't throw for even 90 yards against Clemson and won that game by 21 points, that says a lot about what he can do when he's on. North Carolina, he was on. South Carolina, he was on. Navy first half, he was on. And I would even say Navy second half, he was on from a play calling standpoint. What they didn't do a good enough job of was making some adjustments to the protection scheme, and then the quarterback didn't execute them correctly. But that's part of his job as the quarterback's coach. So the reality is this is a huge year for Tommy Rees. Huge year. The scheme is there. The potential is there. My frustration with some fans is they've already chalked up a 31-year-old coach as just being, this is who he is. That's absurd to me, right? Absurd to me. He's going to get better. He has gotten better. But at some point in time, coaching is just like playing. Some point in time, the potential needs to stop being the conversation point, and it needs to become about the production. Year 4, you got a grad transfer quarterback that you hand selected. You've got stud coming back on the offensive line. You got the best offensive line coach in the business, arguably. You've got arguably the best backfield in the country coming back. They're the very least top 5. At the very least top 5. Your receiving core has a lot to prove, but it's very talented. You added a transfer. You bring everybody back except for Braden Lindsey, right, who was a good player, but not a guy that you built your offense around by any stretch, right? Braden did some good things, should have done even better things. The point is he wasn't the focal point of your offense like Michael Mayer was. You lose Michael Mayer, yes, but you just went out and had 45 points and 558 yards and your second highest yards per play of the season without Michael Mayer. Okay, so
with turning the ball over 3 times.
3 times. Right. Well, I was on Bill King's show today, and he said, Brian, I never thought I would say that a quarterback that turned the ball over 3 times played well, but that's kind of what you thought. And a quarterback who hadn't played since September the September 11th. So my point is, this is the year that Tommy Rees doesn't have any more excuses, right? Nor do I think he wants any excuses. I don't think he uses those excuses. I'm using them, right? To make a point of the talent is there, the mindset is there. And here's something else that gives me, I was done with Tommy Rees halfway through the year. I'll be honest with you. I was frustrated with what we were seeing on the field, the inconsistency. I was frustrated with some of the things I was hearing behind the scenes about how the interactions were going. But when I talk to people in November, this is after the Stanford game, like kind of going through the end of the season, people that were giving me intel about how bad things were on that side of the ball with relationships and how they're going about their business, problems with the coaching staff, problems with Rees, they were all singing a different tune. And these are people that are not, they're not part of the party line, right? You get what I'm saying? These are people that shoot me straight and have always shot me straight. I'm like, okay, well, why is your story different? And a guy was like, So a guy told me a story about how something he did with a player, unprompted, going up to a player that he'd been hard on, was like, dude, this is okay. This is something where he got called out a little bit publicly with the stuff on TV and then some other things, and he responded incredibly well. And so, because my big concern with Tommy Rees is I was concerned he was too stubborn to change. That was my fear. This guy's too stubborn to change. He's really smart and he knows it, and he's not one to change. But we saw some changes late in the year from him, and not just about scheme, Ryan. More importantly, how he coaches, how he interacts, and how he involves the staff. That to me was bigger than anything else that he could have done this year. I don't care about how many times they scored 40 plus points down the stretch and all. I don't care about any of that stuff. That right there is what gave me confidence that Tom Rees is willing to grow as a coach, because if he can evolve and grow as a coach, all the tools are there. He's part, I mean, recruiting wise, I think he's done a heck of a job as a recruiter, especially since kind of Brian Kelly's not there anymore. And he can kind of say, okay, this is how I want the direction of the offensive recruiting to go. He had a big hand in, with the exception of Jared Parker, he had a role in all the coaches that were brought in. And we just got done praising that staff. So to me, Tommy Rees is the wild card here. And by that, I mean, if he is just kind of the same guy he's been next year, it's going to be maddening. It's going to be, why are you so good one week and so not good the next? It's going to be frustrating, and it's going to get to the point where, like, okay, this just is, it is what it is. This is just who he is. Is up and down. One week it's great. The next week it's, what are we doing here? But if he can kind of put it all together and be good Tommy on a consistent basis, this offense has a chance to be really, really special next year, Ryan. And that's what kind of gives me a cautious optimism that this thing is going to get going, because we've seen the potential. And we've especially seen the potential in bowl games. Why does that matter? Because I feel much better about Notre Dame's ability to be prepared to go into a playoff game with a great game plan now than I've been in a long time. And I actually felt, Ryan, I think you and I have talked about this. I actually liked the game plan in 2020 against Bama. It just wasn't executed well, because in some areas you just weren't good enough. In other areas, your quarterback didn't make plays. But I got no fault with the game plan.
Right.
That team was just better than you. And we saw it again against South Carolina. So if that can be the consistent aspect of Tommy Rees, if the consistency in the regular season become better, you start feeling like, okay, we know he's good when he's got time, right? And you've got time for the playoff game, and you've got extra time for the championship game. So you feel like, okay, that's, I'm not worried about. It's, can he do enough to get him there is the big question. And I'm cautiously optimistic, Ryan, but honestly, this is the year where it's gotta show this year. It can't be, oh, he's only this old, that old. This is going to be his 4th year as a coordinator. Now, after 3 years, to me, and this could be arbitrary, after 3 years, your age doesn't matter to me anymore, because the experience is there now. And that's where I'm at on this one, Ryan. What say you?
It's like that Remember the Titans scene, man. It's show me, Bama, show me. That, I mean, Brian, I don't know what to think about Tommy Rees. I don't. And I've been very transparent about that. And every time someone asks me this offseason how I feel about the offense, I'm going to be optimistic that it can be as good as it possibly can be, because I think there's a lot of talent there. But I don't know what to expect with Tommy Rees. I don't. I've seen glimpses of really good things. I've also seen glimpses of not good things. I mean, it's maddening, I think, is the best word that you use there. It's maddening at times, because one week you'll watch it and be like, well, that looked great. And then next week you'll be you scored 14 points against Stanford. Right? Like, it's just, it's.
And 7 of those came in the 4th quarter.
Exactly. And that was a really poorly called football game, right? Like, players didn't make plays, sure, but it was also a poorly called football game. So the inconsistency from one week to the next is just so maddening. It's the best word to describe it. So I am going to be optimistic. I'm going to give Tommy Rees a chance, because I do think that when he is good, he is very good. I do believe that. But I think that it's a show me season. It is, because this is a litmus test, man. Because I know we're going to talk about quarterback during this segment, right? We're going to talk about it. And a lack of quarterback, you have a proven commodity now in the quarterback room. You have one. You had one that has just thrown almost 80 touchdowns in 2 years. You have a guy that's been incredibly productive.
77, right?
77. Yeah, 77. Quick math.
And also
Good
has
job.
12 rushing touchdowns.
Exactly.
In the last 2 years has accounted for almost 90 touchdowns in 2 years.
You have a quarterback entering the room that is the all-time leader in touchdown passes in ACC history.
Bro, if Sam Hartman throws for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns this year, he will finish his career 4th all-time in passing yards and 3rd all-time in touchdown passes in NCAA history.
And this is a litmus test for me. I said that it's a litmus test for Chancey Stuckey to see how he improves the room. This is a litmus test just for how good Tommy Rees can be as an offensive coordinator, because there is no excuses. You're going to have one of the better offensive lines in college football coming back. You're going to have a proven commodity at quarterback. You're going to have a lot of talent in the wide receiver room. You're going to have one of the best running back rooms in college football coming back. There's not really a hole in this offensive roster. It's a good roster, and it's a talented one, and there's a lot of proven commodities coming back. It rests on player execution always, but more than anything, the offensive coaching staff needs to put these guys in the position to make plays. And I think that they can. I think that Tommy Rees can. But if he can't, that is a red flag, sound the buzzer. Like there's something not going right here. There isn't. So there's a lot to prove this year for Tommy Rees. I think that he has an opportunity to dispel a lot of the opinions on him, or he has a chance to prove them all right. It's going to go one way or the other. But this is a great opportunity for him to show just how good he can be, because he's got a lot of toys to work with this year.
Right. In depth of toys. So if something happens to Sam Hartman, because you can't just dismiss how the quarterback play limited this offense this year. You can't. I mean, I didn't like the game plan against Stanford at all. There were still 6 or 7 opportunities where that's an easy throw you got to make. I mean, there's throws where Tobias Merriweather, he got the touchdown, but there was another play, Ryan, where he was running a big over route and he was just wide open and Drew just wouldn't look at him. He was just locked in on Michael Mayer. Some of those third down passes that came in complete late in the game, it's like he's just locked in on Mayer where there's another dude wide open, right? So, I mean, but again, you're the quarterback's coach. But at the same time, you're playing with your backup quarterback. So I'm gonna be merciful and give him a pass. Not a pass. Give him okay, I get it, right? I get it. You had some issues there at the quarterback position. But next year, if something happens to Sam Hartman, God forbid, you've got a pretty dynamic kid coming off the bench that would have been your starter next year if not for the injuries. Because I said this on the Bill King show, and I think I've said it here as well, on this show as well. If Tyler Buckner doesn't get hurt, we're not talking about a transfer quarterback like Sam Hartman. We're talking about them bringing in a depth player. That's it. It's a depth guy, because I still think Drew would have left anyway. You're talking about, okay, who are you going to bring in, to compete in the room? And maybe not even anyone at all, because you'd have Angeli, you'd have Kenny Mitchell coming in. I'd feel good about the backup at that point in time to a degree. I'd still say maybe bringing a veteran because of Tyler's injury history. But if he wouldn't have got injured, he'd have look, the dude's played now 2 full years in Notre Dame, and the only game he missed was against Wisconsin with a hamstring, but a game he probably could have played in if he was the starter, right? He probably would have gutted through it. And so, but he didn't. He didn't stay healthy. He did get hurt. And so that's why we are where we are with Sam Hartman. But it also doesn't change the fact that if Tyler Buckner is not the starting quarterback this year, and he is the backup quarterback, you're going to be bringing a pretty dang football player off the bench. There's no question about it. You're going to have depth where if your top 2, we talked about this, if your top 2 running backs for some reason are unavailable, there's a lot of teams that would love to have a backfield of Chris Tyree, Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, and Jabron Payne.
Oh, yeah. I
mean, think about that. If you lose your top 2 receivers, let's just say it's Lorenzo Styles and Jaden Thomas. Yep. You still have Deion Colsey, both Caleb Smiths, Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James. I mean, there's still plenty of weapons there. Same at tight end. I mean, people are just like, hey, maybe you should move Blake Fisher guard because they want to get Tosh Baker going at tackle, right? I mean, the point is there's depth everywhere. There are playmakers everywhere. It's just right now, the problem is it offensive coordinator and receiver, the conversation is still too much about potential and not enough about production.
Exactly.
The more that changes, the better it will be, in my